Civil War and Reconstruction, Part 2. And this time, it's personal. So, you didn't do as well as you wanted to on the Civil War and Reconstruction test. I mean, you studied, you thought you had everything perfect, but then it just didn't work out for you. Well, don't get mad. Get glad. Because now you have another opportunity to relearn all the information and then kick a little booty on round 2. Now, here's what you have to do. You get this piece of paper out that has all the blanks in it. Now, I'm going to go through every single one. You watch the number in the top left corner right up here. It will show you what number we're on. The red text is what I want you to write in. You write in what is red. When you're done, you have a perfect study guide, the most premium study guide you could ever think of. Then you're going to make note cards from that study guide. Study those note cards. Be ready for round 2 because this time it is personal. Let's get into the Civil War and Reconstruction. By far one of the most interesting topics in American history. Now it starts with slave compromises. We've already learned about one slave compromise, the Missouri Compromise. Drew that line above free, below slave, except for Missouri. Well, that is just sweeping the dirt under the rug, the dirt of slavery. Now, there's going to be 2 more times to sweep it under the rug, but it ain't going to work out. We're going to have Civil War. Let's go for the first one. Here we are with number 1, number 1, number 1, number 1, number 1. The compromise, write that in, the compromise of 1850-1850. This is right after the Mexican-American War. Remember, the Mexican-American War gave the United States an enormous amount of land from the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. Now, one state that was emerging would be California. The question is California, is it going to be a free state or a slave state? Well, there's 3 big parts of the Compromise of 1850. Step 1, Cali is free. Remember, California comes in as a free state. Now, what about those other territories, those other Southwest territories? They will decide for themselves. That's called popular sovereignty. But the South would say, well, what do we get? What makes it easier for us in this slave versus free battle? And that is a harsh, write this in, fugitive slave law is passed. Now, if there's a runaway slave who goes in the north, it is much easier to catch those runaway slaves and bring them down south. Many free African Americans would be caught up in this as well. A harsh fugitive slave law goes into effect as part of the Compromise of 1850. Next one, Kansas-Nebraska Act. The Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854 repealed the Missouri Compromise. Okay, so check this out. Look here with me. Right here is where the line was for the Missouri Compromise. Anything above it has to be free. Now, they create these new territories. This one right here, Kansas Territory, and this one right here, Nebraska Territory. And what they said was those territories, they're not going to be automatically free, which is what the Missouri Compromise would say. Instead, they're going to decide for themselves. Now, what does that mean to allow residents to decide the issue of slavery for themselves? That is called, as we said earlier, popular sovereignty. It looks like my face is cutting off the TY at the very end of sovereignty. Popular sovereignty. So, this Missouri Compromise is gone. See you later. Bye-bye. Let's go to 333, round number 3. This creates bloody fighting in Kansas, because everybody knew Nebraska was going to be free, but Kansas might go slave. So slave owners would come into Kansas for that big vote, popular sovereignty voting. People who are abolitionists would go into Kansas and they would fight each other. And a political party was formed, a new political party was formed, which was against the extension of slavery into the territories. And that new party, write this in, was the Republican Party. It was formed as a party which opposed the spread of slavery. All right, so we got 3 compromises, right? We got the Missouri Compromise, we got the Compromise of 1850, and now we have the Kansas-Nebraska Act. Now, that's not what brings us directly to war. That is one of the causes of war. Let's talk about the overall causes of this Civil War. Here's 3. Ready? Boom! Sectional disagreements and debates over tariffs. You know, remember we talked about how the North likes tariffs and the South hates tariffs. Debates over the extension of slavery into the territories. A simple answer for what caused the Civil War is, slavery. That's a bad answer. A better answer is the extension of slavery into the territories. That's what people are fighting over. Also, nature of union. I write this in the parentheses. States, right? States' rights. This idea of what can a state do? Can a state ignore a federal law, like what was done in the nullification crisis with South Carolina. So we got those three causes, big causes, big causes. Here's another one, like we talked about. Failed compromises over the extension of slavery. So we're talking about the Missouri Compromise, the Compromise of 1850, the Kansas-Nebraska Act. All of those failed to bring an end to the issue of slavery. Did we have good presidents in the 1850s? No, we had terrible presidents in the 1850s. Write this in. Ineffective presidential leadership in the 1850s. What we really mean here is the Civil War is coming in the 1860s. Did any of these guys do anything to stop the Civil War from coming? No, they just compromised, and then the issue got bigger and bigger and bigger. All right? What if you were a Northern abolitionist? You hated slavery. What if you were a Southerner with lots of slaves? You defended slavery. Well, then we have battles. We have a lot of battles between Northern, write this in, abolitionists and Southern defenders of slavery. One of the most important Northern abolitionists was a woman named Harriet Beecher Stowe. Harriet Beecher Stowe, write that in, full name, Beecher, B-E-E-C-H-E-R, Stowe, S-T-O-W-E. Wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin, which was the most popular book besides what other book? T-Spice? The Bible. But it was second most popular, sold 300,000 copies in its first year in print. It increased abolitionist sentiment. You read Uncle Tom's Cabin, the issue of slavery was more personal to you, and you became involved in the abolitionist cause, or at least many people became involved in the abolitionist cause. Here's another one. See this gentleman right here pictured? That's Dred Scott. Dred Scott was a slave who was brought to free territory. He sued for his freedom. He said, I should not be a slave if I'm in free territory. The case goes all the way to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court made terrible, one might say dreadful, Supreme Court decision, denied Dred Scott his freedom, and stated that Congress could not limit the expansion of slavery, that slavery was free to expand all the way to the Pacific Ocean, that all of these compromises didn't mean anything. All right, so there's some build-up. You ready for a huge moment? We got like a soda can, man, and we're just like shaking the heck out of it. And all it's going to take is like one or two things to explode this can and get us in the Civil War. Now, what I'm about to talk to you about is not just any sequence of events. This is a key Civil War sequence. You ready? Here we go, here we go, here we go. Boom! There it is. In 1860, a guy named Abraham Lincoln is elected President of the United States. The South hates this. The South fear that he's going to try to abolish slavery, so they secede. They do not succeed, they secede, which means they leave the Union, fearing Abraham Lincoln would try to abolish slavery. Now, Abraham Lincoln wants to keep control of a fort that's just outside on the ocean in South Carolina off of Charleston. It's called Fort Sumter. The South says, we've left the Union. It's our property. Get the heck out of there. The United States military does not get the heck out of there. So in 1861, the South fires on Fort Sumter. The first shots of the Civil War have gone off, and now this thing is on like Donkey Kong. They get control of Fort Sumter. Lincoln hates this and calls for federal troops, write that in, troops, in 1861. And now we've got ourselves a little war. That's going to be a big war. Let's talk about the key leaders of this Civil War. Let's talk about a couple of people and why they're important. Number one is a guy we just talked about, got elected, Abraham Lincoln. He'll be President of the United States for the entire Civil War. Now, he insisted that the Union must be held together because the Union was an indivisible Union. And if he has to use force to do it, if blood has to be spilled on the fields of Pennsylvania and in Virginia, he's happy to do it. He will use force to keep the Union together. Now, he's the President of the United States. We now have a new country, and that would be the Confederate States, and they have a president too. Their president is a guy named Jefferson Davis. A former senator from Mississippi will be the president, the only president that the Confederacy will have in its short existence. All right, we got presidents. Let's get ourselves some generals. Union's best general, number one, would be Ulysses S. Grant, G-R-A-N-T. Grant was the Union commander who would win victories after others had failed. Now, what did they fail to do? They failed to consistently beat the South's best general, and the South's best general was Robert E. Lee. Okay, it looks like my face is blocking all of this, so let me read this to you slowly. Robert E. Lee, I want you to write this in, Confederate C-O-N-F-E-D-E-R-A-T-E, Confederate General of the Army of, now this will be an easy one for you to remember, because where do we live? We live in Northern Virginia. The Army of Northern Virginia. That's right, right where we live. This dirt that we walk on every single day and night was the most important area in the American Civil War. And Robert E. Lee is the Confederate general from Virginia, leading the Army of Northern Virginia. They're your two big commanders. Now, what about Lee? How did Lee feel about this war? Well, he was actually against secession. He opposed the idea that Virginia and other states could just leave. But remember how I told you that Abraham Lincoln was happy to use force to keep the Union together? No. That Lee disagreed with. And that was what Lee believed would not be acceptable. So he did not believe the Union should be held together by force. All right. On the freeing the slaves front, who's the most important person there? That'll be Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass was a former enslaved African-American from Maryland who became a prominent abolitionist. He will argue to Abraham Lincoln that slavery needs to be abolished and African-Americans need to fight in the Union Army. Okay? So last point right here, urge Lincoln to recruit former slaves to fight in the Union Army. Perfect. All right, we got leaders. We've got leaders, but we don't have battles yet. What is the most important battle, the major events of the Civil War? Most important battle is the Battle of Gettysburg, which takes place in Pennsylvania in 1863. The Battle of Gettysburg was won by the North, and it was a turning point of the Civil War, which means we get to listen to epic turning point music. It gets to me every time. Why was it such an important battle? Because Robert E. Lee had invaded the North and he was turned back. It ended Lee's invasion of the North. Goodbye, he's out of there. Now, once this battle is done, you got to bury the dead. You got to say a few nice words as you dedicate this cemetery in Gettysburg. So they have President Lincoln, who gave a very short speech that was called the Gettysburg Address.
407 years ago,
and in the Gettysburg Address,
our fathers brought forth on this continent
Lincoln described the Civil War
conceived in liberty
as a struggle to preserve a nation,
created equal.
Dedicated to the proposition that all men are created
now
equal.
We are engaged in a great civil war.
He said the U.S. was a government of the people. Fill in people. By the people. Fill in people.
We are met
for the
on
people.
The great battlefield
Fill in
of that war.
People.
We have come to
These are key quotes, reaffirming his goal the whole time, which was to keep this union together. Now, in the Gettysburg Address, America, he believed, was one nation, not a collection of sovereign states. Sovereign meaning have the power to do what you want, have the power to leave, if you will. And that Southerners believed that they could freely join the Union and they could freely leave the Union. And Abraham Lincoln said this is going to be we will hold this nation together throughout the Civil War. Now, how does it end? North win, South win. North, big winners in the Civil War, number 16. Where does Lee surrender to Grant? Remember, Grant is the North's best soldier. Robert E. Lee surrendered to Ulysses S. Grant at Appomattox, which is in Virginia. It's in the heart of Virginia, in 1865. Now, this war is over. And right when it is over, some of Robert E. Lee's soldiers says, "Let's go to the mountains, Lee. Let's keep fighting." And Lee says, "Oh, nah. After surrender, Lee urged Southerners to accept defeat and unite as Americans, even though some Southerners wanted to continue. And the word we want to put in here is fighting. I believe my face is blocking it. Please put fighting. So it's over, baby. This war is over. Civil War done. But what was the impact of this Civil War? We're going to talk about a couple of impacts. First of all, we're going to talk about the social impact of the war. Number one, warfare involved hand-to-hand combat. And diaries and letters recorded this harsh reality of how difficult war exactly was. You know where the war was mostly fought? It was in the South. Because the North had to conquer the South, take over the South for leaving the Union. So that means that, especially in the South, soldiers returned to destroyed homes and to poverty. Now, if you get shot with a cannonball or a musket shot right in the leg and your leg is amputated, you're going to live the rest of your life with permanent, please write this word in, the last part for number 17, permanent disabilities. Permanent disabilities took place on both sides during the Civil War. So the men are fighting. Well, what does that mean? Who steps up at the farm in the war industry? So that, of course, would be women. Women managed homes and families with scarce, meaning not a lot, of resources. They faced poverty and hunger, and they assumed new roles in farming the fields as the men were gone, so that's agriculture. Nursing, before the Civil War, almost all nurses were men, and that changed because of the Civil War. Nursing and war industries. Women are making the bullets, sewing the flags, putting the uniforms together. Women's roles changed dramatically. But the most dramatic change as a result of the Civil War is the end of slavery. And slavery gets a death blow with the Emancipation Proclamation. Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation on the very first day of 1863, and he did it after Northern success at the Battle of Antietam. Please write that in. At the Battle of Antietam, which happened in late 1862, Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation. Now, I know what you're thinking. How am I supposed to ever remember that the Emancipation Proclamation happened after the Battle of Antietam? Well, don't you worry, because I just thought of a premium way for us always to remember this. Antietam leads to freedom. Remember, Antietam, freedom. Antietam, freedom. Battle of Antietam leads to the Emancipation Proclamation, which gives freedom. But it doesn't give total freedom. It gives freedom to slaves in the rebelling states. So if you are a slave in the Confederacy, you are freed by the Emancipation Proclamation, or at least once the Union soldiers get there to free you. It does not free the slaves living in the border states of Missouri, Kentucky, Delaware, and Maryland, only in the rebelling states. But it made the abolition of slavery now a Northern war aim. It's not just about preserving the Union anymore. It's about freeing slaves. It discouraged interference from foreign governments, meaning Great Britain, you don't want to side with the Confederacy, because this war is now a war about freeing slaves. Don't be on the wrong side of history. Also, it allowed for the enlistment, write this in, I'm blocking it, of African Americans into the Union Army. African American soldiers will fight in the Union Army because of the Emancipation Proclamation. So you got no more slavery down south, and you've got African American troops. You got a war aim, abolition of slavery, and you got foreign government. Stay out of this, baby. Plus, this all started because of what battle? What battle? What leads to freedom? Say it. Say it. That's right, I heard it. Antietam. What was the economic impact of war? Well, Southerners, number 21, left embittered and devastated. Their farms and their railroads and their factories are destroyed. Now, their big cities were destroyed by war as well. The capital of the Confederacy was here in Virginia, and that was Richmond. Southern cities such as Richmond and Atlanta were destroyed. But at least you can grow stuff, right? Not really. You got a bunch of white dudes laying around. No, they died in war. Labor changed due to loss of life. But you still have slaves, right? No, you don't have slaves anymore because of the Emancipation Proclamation. Slavery was over. Life had been lost because of the Civil War. Your labor source had dramatically changed. Now, the South will remain an agricultural, write that in, agricultural-based economy. And my face is blocking, write this in, the poorest section of the nation. It will remain the poorest section of the nation well after the Civil War. Okay, what about the North and Midwest? Oh, just the opposite. 22, we're on number 22. The North and Midwest emerged with strong, growing industrial economies. They are making stuff, and they are a big-time engine creating economic development. This laid the foundation, write that in, foundation, for the industrialization of the nation, except in the South, in the next 50 years. Okay, so basically the impact, at least money-wise, for the North and the Midwest is good, and for the South is not as good. Now, the U.S. would emerge as a global economic power by the beginning of the 20th century, 1900s. All right? All right, now, let's talk Reconstruction, because, you know, this whole country got ripped apart by Civil War, but it was forced back together. But now, I mean, like, how do you fix the wounds. You know, how do you heal the country after the Civil War? Well, Abraham Lincoln's going to be Mr. Nice Guy. Lincoln supported a lenient, which means gentle, Reconstruction. Think Lincoln lenient, Lincoln lenient. Here's his quote from his second inaugural address. He says, with malice, malice meaning anger, hatred, towards none. We're going to have no anger, no hatred towards no one. And charity for all, to bind up our nation's wounds. So it seems like the South has got a good friend in Abraham Lincoln. But someone from the South decides to assassinate Abraham Lincoln, and that's John Wilkes Booth at Ford's Theater. Write this in. The assassination of Abraham Lincoln just a couple of days after Lee surrenders to Grant at Appomattox changes Reconstruction permanently. This enabled a new group, those are called the Radical Republicans, to use Reconstruction in a punitive manner, meaning they plan on punishing the South for causing the Civil War. Lincoln did not believe in punishing the South. Lincoln believed in a lenient Reconstruction, but the Radical Republicans believe in punishing the South. So now Reconstruction has changed. Okay, so what are these Radical Republicans planning on doing? Well, number one, let's stick the military in the South. Let's divide the South up into 5 military districts and keep an eye on every single thing that they do. This is embarrassing for the South. That is a form of punishment. Now let's give voting and other civil rights to African Americans. That is what the Radical Republicans push for. At that time, kind of a radical idea, which is why they're called the Radical Republicans. Now, the Radical Republicans hated the president who took over after Abraham Lincoln, and that was President Andrew Johnson. Radical Republicans clashed with Andrew Johnson. Now, Andrew Johnson wanted to be easy on the South, and Andrew Johnson did not want all these rights going to the South. The Radical Republicans wanted to punish the South and give voting and other civil rights. They clashed, they impeached. Eventually, write this in, impeaching him, which means the House of Representatives puts them on trial. The Senate actually kicks out, removes. The Senate barely decided not to remove Andrew Johnson from office, so they did not remove him. Instead, he was acquitted by the Senate. But the fact that he got impeached shows that he's having issues dealing with his Congress. All right, 3 big amendments. Now, you just got to know some amendments, man. There's 27 of them, and some you got to know. I want you to remember this. You're a teenager, right? All right, start there. Start with the earliest teen number. That is 13. We're going to go 13, 14, 15, and we're going to remember all of these. The 13th Amendment, slavery is abolished. Now you're saying to yourself, dude, Emancipation Proclamation, we've already abolished slavery. No. We've only abolished it in the rebelling states, not in the border states, not all over the United States. So now it's gone. See you later. Bye-bye. There will never be slavery again in the United States of America. That's the 13th Amendment. Now, do you see that word that's bolded right next to the end of the sentence? It says free. I want you to circle that right now. Circle it and say to yourself, free. 14th Amendment. States prohibited from denying equal rights under the law to any American. If you have certain civil rights, a southern state can't come in and take those rights away. So think about this. You were a slave, and now you're free, but like, what are you? Are you a citizen? The 14th Amendment grants the right of citizenship to freed African Americans. So I want you to circle the word citizens. Keep track of this. We got free citizens. Now, what do free citizens get to do? Number 28, vote. 15th Amendment, voting rights are guaranteed regardless of race, color, or previous servitude. Word next to that is vote. So remember this right here. You ready? You ready? Let's go. 13, free. 14, citizens. 15, vote. Sounds like something you would see like a bumper sticker from someone who goes to Starbucks 20 times a day. You know, free citizens vote, man. Come on, sign my petition, man. Free citizens vote, man. Just remember it, because it'll help you remember 13, 14, and 15. How did Reconstruction come to an end? Well, it came to the end with the election of 1876. This is when Southern Democrats supported a Northern Republican, Rutherford B. Hayes, in exchange for the end of military occupation in the South, meaning get troops out of the South to actually end Reconstruction officially. Now, they did so, and it was called the Compromise of 1877. So with the Compromise of 1877, Reconstruction is over, which means those former Confederates have the ability to regain power. And they do regain power. It opens up the door, write this in, for the Jim Crow era, the era of segregation in the South. And there's no one around who can stop it because the troops have left the South. Hey, let's talk about post-war leaders. Last topic, post-war leaders. What did these leaders do after the American Civil War? Let's start with Grant. You know, Grant was a president for most of Reconstruction. Now, he was like the radical Republicans in that he wanted to give rights to freedmen, to freed slaves, but he was not like radical Republicans because he opposed retribution. Here we go. Opposed retribution, meaning punishing the South, and urged radical Republicans not to be harsh. He also advocated for the rights of, write this in, last word here, freedmen, F-R-E-E-D-M-A-N, for freedmen. That's what Ulysses S. Grant did after the war. What did Robert E. Lee do after the war? Well, he told every Southerner he could find that it is time to reconcile and rejoin the United States. Get over it. We lost. It's time to become Americans. He thought the most important thing wasn't guns, but books. He emphasized education, right in education, and became the president of a college in Lexington, Virginia, that then was called Washington College. He will die as president of Washington College, and they will rename it to what it is today, Washington and Lee College. What about Frederick Douglass? What did FD do? Frederick Douglass supported full equality for African Americans. He encouraged the federal government to protect the rights of freedmen, advocated for the 14th citizens, 15th voting rights to be protected, and serves as an ambassador to Haiti and in the civil service. Now what's crazy is Frederick Douglass, born a slave with no rights in Maryland, becomes an ambassador of the United States to Haiti and works in the civil service. Shows how far the United States went from before the Civil War to after the Civil War.